everyone. Very nice crowd. You guys are so welcoming. I appreciate that. I don't get that in the morning when I walk on the set. It's not the same. So Claire McCaskill is kind of a member of the Morning Joe family. Is that okay to say?
I think it's okay.
It's okay to say.
It doesn't mean I have to kiss Joe.
No, it's kind of a dysfunctional family.
It
but
is.
We
you put the fun in dysfunction.
Oh, thanks. I'm not sure they say that about me, but Claire does. Claire's the one I don't worry about, though. Like when she comes on and she takes on Joe, I just sit back, I have a cigarette. You know? Because I'm like, I know she can do it. It's always a great, great time to have you on the show, and I've always marveled at you and your accomplishments, both personal and professional. I've sort of been obsessed a little bit because you have such a command of not just the message you want to send, the point you want to make, but it seems over yourself as a woman. You know what you want to do, where you want to go, and you're also very honest about the struggle. So let's talk about the book, Plenty Ladylike, which is fantastic, because ladylike is not the term that I would necessarily use to describe us. Having said that, I think both of our grandmothers used it, saying, be ladylike.
It's true.
But others have used it as well. Tell me about the term and your feelings about it.
Well, it became the title because after my first debate with Todd Aiken in 2012, he told the press that I had not been very ladylike. And that reminded me of when I was in the 8th grade, and I had a teacher that I loved. Broke my heart because she told me I needed to quit talking so much, that I was expressing too many opinions, that the boys weren't going to like me, and that it wasn't ladylike. And so I remembered that because it hurt me when she said that to me. And then when Todd Aiken said it. So when I wrote this book, which I hope is a way for young women to see ambition and strategic risk-taking as something that's very ladylike, I wanted to send that message that it's plenty ladylike to be outspoken, aggressive, and go for it. So that's where the title came from.
And you know, you talk about people not liking you and being warned about that, like it should matter. And I think that's such an interesting phrase that's used for women a lot. Like, I think it bothers us if people don't like us. And it's used against us. Like, I know when I was trying to get a raise, one that I deserved in a big way, I was told, don't ask for this raise, people won't like you. And I actually went, oh, really? And it wasn't supposed to matter. It's not supposed to matter in life necessarily.
My dad did a couple of things for me. First of all, I think way too many women have the disease to appease. And you know, trying to make sure that everyone's happy. My dad gave me permission when I was young. He said to me, Claire, you will never be a leader. You will never get anything done without making people mad. Get comfortable with it. Get used to it. Everybody doesn't have to like you. You don't have to be popular to be a leader. And while you got to be polite and you've got to be kind and empathetic, it's okay if, and by the way, I did pick a profession, if you haven't looked at the trolls on my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
I get a lot of hate. I got a lot of professional haters in this line of work.
And that's usually a sign you're doing your job.
And usually when they're the most mad at me is when I've probably done something that is most meaningful. So I kind of look at it as, okay, good. I've really made them mad today. Yay.
You've gotten used to it.
Right. Gotten used to it.
You got to get used to it, by the way. In order to succeed, you do have to be able to be okay with some people not being completely satisfied with who you are and what you've done, and get over that need to appease. You're ambitious, is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very.
Have you always been comfortable with your ambition?
No. For the first time in this book, I tell what is admittedly an embarrassing story, but it exposes the depth of my ambition. When I was in high school, I figured out that the homecoming queen got elected every year because she generally was the girlfriend of the quarterback. And I looked at the football team and realized how many linemen there were. Lots of linemen, only a couple of quarterbacks. So I started working the linemen. Becoming friends with all of the tackles and the ends and the linebackers. And in the process, they became my friends. It wasn't all calculation. But guess who got elected homecoming queen?
Come on now.
It was my first campaign that I executed quietly and strategically. Now, that's embarrassing, and so I told that story in this book because I wanted to be brutally honest about the depth of my ambition, even for something as silly as being the homecoming queen.
And I love that story because that's really like the makings of a politician on so many levels. It's unbelievable. It's fun, but the depth of your ambition started young. And I think women, especially of our generation, there's a lot of younger women in the room. How many are you comfortable with your ambition? Do you feel like you have? That's awesome.
That's good. That's a good showing.
Awesome. I wasn't. I was worried. It would get in the way of my relationships. I was worried it wasn't ladylike. So it's nice to see young people kind of pushing through that. Don't forget to have kids. Okay, just my advice.
It's true.
Back to Claire, though. In terms of the book, times are changing in terms of ambition, in terms of the definition of ladylike. I think we have a long way to go when it comes to sexism, but you saw your share in the state legislature. Some of the stories in this book are unbelievable in terms of what people actually said to your face.
Yeah.
Men.
Yeah.
Go there.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get my first bill out of committee. I was 29, I think, at the time. So I had just gotten elected to the legislature. I was single. I went up on the dais of the Missouri House of Representatives where the Speaker was presiding, and I said, Mr. Speaker, I would love your advice on how I get my first bill out of committee. And he turned to me and he said, did you bring your knee pads?
Hi.
Now,
Hi. I'm sorry, what'd you say back to that?
He thought it was a funny joke. I kind of and walked off. Yeah. Obviously, I didn't forget it. And I talk about in this book, I'm not sure I handled it all well, because there were other incidents I talk about in the book that occurred when I was a state legislator, because in my mind, I had to navigate around it. I didn't confront it. I navigated around it because I wanted to be effective. But I'll tell you what it did do. It sharpened my focus to get around these jerks and do better and be more successful. So it certainly motivated me. Now, the sad part of this story is a few weeks ago, we've had a couple of members of the legislature in Missouri exposed for essentially sexting with an intern, and then another intern that came forward and accused a state senator of sexual harassment. And the young woman reached out to me that accused the senator, and I talked to her on the phone. I told her how proud I was of her.
Yeah.
Because when I was an intern and it happened to me, I didn't confront it. I tried to figure out a way around it. And so I think the good news is that there are brave young women now that are confronting it. The sad thing is that it's 30 years later and this nonsense is still going on in the Missouri legislature. That's the most depressing part of the story. But the good news is that we have women who are confident enough that are going forward and saying, hey, no, I'm going to publicly expose you. And by the way, both those guys lost their jobs over it. Good, right? They had to resign.
I think the more there is a comfort zone to push back right in the moment, which is very hard to do, which is why I said, what did you say? Because I would have probably done the same thing. I would have been so shocked. I would have been speechless. Today, I'd push back. Today, I go, really? Really? I'm sorry, so can you say that again? I need to hear it out loud so I can record it. I mean, I just would go right there.
Well, keep in mind that I'm not sure that these things are said to women who the people think are strong.
I know.
I think they try to take advantage of women who they think are in a much subservient position, and so therefore are not going to confront them, and that's part of the insidious nature of it.
Publicly being called a hooker. Talk about that.
Yeah, that happened, and a whore.
Oh.
And the C word.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all in there. You can imagine when I read the audio, when it came time for me to read the audio of the book into the microphone, and it came to the C word, I don't say that word, and I had to say it into the microphone. I'm sure that one of my haters is going to splice the audio book and say, oh, look at how Claire McCaskill talks when she's out around town. Yeah, right, exactly. So, there was a lot of... the atmosphere when I was a young legislator was, it was a free-for-all. It was very, very sexist. But I got stronger, and I got better. And one time I confronted a bunch of them in the elevator, and I was really mad because they had just done a skit about me in front of everyone that was very inappropriate. And I was so mad, I just turned and looked at about 4 or 5 of them, and I said, you know the difference between me and you? This is not the best job I'm ever going to have. Turned out to be true.
She's tough. I love it. I love when Claire came on Morning Joe, and she was so tough with us. I was so in awe of her. I'm like, gosh, she's so tough. And then I interviewed her for my book, and we got kind of raw and real about family, and she would talk about, like, being a prosecutor and, you know, working on putting a guy to jail for life who sexually abused children or something, and, you know, pounding away at that, and then, like, rushing home and sweating over making a homemade meatloaf because she wanted to be the perfect mom. And I was like, oh my God, she's just like me. We're struggling, and it's hard to try and be all things at the same time. And it was a rough road trying to be.
Yeah, and I talk about my first marriage and how hard it was to fail at that, and that I realized that I was using my work as an excuse because I had a big job. I was the elected DA in a very large metropolitan area. It was the largest prosecutor's office in the state. We handled between 8,000 and 10,000 felonies a year. I had hundreds of lawyers working for me. Doesn't that sound like a good excuse that I can't get home and confront the fact that my husband and I aren't really talking to each other at this point? And I talk about that in the book because I think it's important to be realistic that this isn't about some smooth ride with no bumps. It's a roller coaster, and we're lucky that life's a roller coaster because then you appreciate that ride down is so much fun because the ride up is slightly scary. And your life's like that. And so I really go there. I talk about my first marriage and the failure of my first marriage and how hard it was to be a single mom with 3 kids running a statewide campaign. And my inadequacies with my children, how I've done some shameful things as it relates to, like the time I paid someone to make the cookies for my daughter's Valentine's Day party at school, and I actually paid them to write every student's name on the cookies. And then I took them to school and kind of pretended like I'd done it.
You're getting into Veep territory here.
I know.
You seen the show Veep?
I know. It's kind of true, though. I didn't want to tell all the other mothers that I, hadn't done it myself. So I didn't lie. I just didn't really fully explain that I hadn't made the cookies. Oh, these cookies are so
You made
great.
them.
They're so wonderful. I go, I know, aren't they great? It's like...
She made them in her own way. She made the money that paid for them. How's that?
I did do that.
Oh, yeah, we have more in common than you know. Your family, though, is a tremendous influence on your professional life. You found a way to bring it all together. Not perfect, not easy, not without risk, not without loss, not without sacrifice. That being said, they do influence your professional life. Can you give me some examples of maybe where your kids got in your face and impacted?
Oh, no question. My children, I am very lucky now. They're wonderful young adults, and they've turned out well. I tell women that are struggling with careers, it will be okay. My kids are independent. They have a mind of their own. I think part of that is that they were exposed to needing to be independent because I was sometimes distracted, and also hopefully I exposed them to lots of different points of view. But my daughter, in the 2008 campaign, I was struggling with a choice between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, both amazing candidates. I was close to Barack Obama. We'd worked together in the Senate. While the Clintons had helped me in my race in 2006, Barack Obama had come in the state multiple times for me, and I was so inspired by his candidacy. And my kids were inspired by his candidacy, and I kept talking about how great he was and how excited I was about him being president, but I wasn't endorsing him. My daughter got right in my face, and she said, you need to look yourself in the mirror. You have been telling me my entire life that the sacrifices that we have all made for your career are worth it because you make a difference, that you're willing to make a difference. And now the only reason you are not endorsing Barack Obama is you're worried about your own political skin. You're worried about the blowback from your supporters that are going to be disappointed that you're not supporting Hillary Clinton. And you ought to, I don't think she said man up, but she said something
like that.
Yeah, you really need to, confront this. And I realized she was right. I was worried about women who had supported me being disappointed with me. I was worried about the political risks I was taking. And so the next day I called the now president and said, I'm in. I'm for you. And off we went to, and then I was all in. As you know, when I get in, I'm all in. And so I was all in for Barack Obama, and today I'm glad to be all in for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and don't get in her way about that.
I do feel the burn, however.
I feel the burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do not need sunscreen.
Do you know what we're saying? B-E-R-N?
I do not need sunscreen.
You don't?
No, I feel the burn. Now, I mean this sincerely. I think what he's doing, he's touching a chord, and I get the chord he's touching, and it's an important conversation we need to have. In the long run, I think it's going to be very good for our country and good for our party. I do believe that Hillary Clinton will be the nominee, and she'll be elected, and I hope that she is. But I certainly respect what Bernie's doing and how he's doing it.
So
all the haters out there, love for Bernie.
I was about to say, I plan to come on this stage and just not worry about the news and just talk about Plenty Ladylike because it's that good. But having said that, breaking news, Claire McCaskill feels the burn. Tweet that. So let me ask you, there are a couple more questions before we open it up to the audience. I think it's important that these young people know how to shotgun a beer. So could you explain? Thank you. Yeah.
This was also Maddie. Maddie and Lily were with me during the time I was helping Todd Akin win the primary. I probably not supposed to talk about this either, but I put it in the book. We decided in June and July of that year that Todd Akin was the best opponent for me to have. I polled in the Republican primary, figured out what Republicans liked about Todd Akin, and then Front Street, I didn't do it with some shadowy third-party committee. Front Street, we put $1.7 million of our money into an ad paid for by Claire McCaskill. I approved this message telling the voters that Todd Akin was too conservative for Missouri because of X, Y, and Z, which happened to be X, Y, and Z that Republican primary voters loved about him. So it was like a dog whistle to the primary Republican voter to be for Todd Akin, and it worked like a dream. We actually took him from down in the polls, and he won. It was a huge risk. My daughters were with me when all these decisions were being made, and so they said at the time, Mom, if Todd Akin wins the primary, you've got to shotgun a beer. I did not know. In my era, we didn't have shotgunning beers, so they had to show me, but when Todd Akin won that night in August, and the journalists in Washington didn't believe I'd shotgunned a beer, so I actually tweeted the day the book came out, I tweeted the pictures of me shotgunning a beer. So you can go on my Twitter feed and see the proof. So.
Okay, so it's the side of the can?
Yeah, you put a hole. No, you put a hole kind of in the bottom of the can, and then you put it up over your mouth, and then you pop the tab, and that creates the pressure that shoots the beer down your throat rather than a leisurely sip.
Do you all have
Is that correct?
Are
right?
we good?
Did I get it right?
Thank you. That was fantastic. So I actually, in our final 2 minutes here, just what do you hope readers will take away from this book? When you set out to write it, what were you hoping to share?
I really want young women to get really comfortable with not being perfect, making mistakes, taking risks, being hyper strategic and focused, and having just loads of ambition. Our country will be better for it. I want Ladylike to be speaking out and changing the world, not being polite and demure and knowing how to throw a nice party or cook a nice dinner. That's all good. I can do all that, by the way. I'm a pretty good cook, and I love to cook, and I love to have a party, but ambition has to be part of it. I see what the 20 women in the United States Senate can get done. We are a force to be reckoned with. Even though we don't agree on everything, the 20 of us, when we are all together, we scare them. I mean, the other 80 kind of go, oh my gosh, they're all together, we're in trouble. And we need more. We got to have more women in government, in corporate boardrooms, CEOs. And we're only going to get those women if women really get comfortable with their ambition and foster it and be around people who foster it. Don't be around people who try to smash it. In the long run, it's just going to make you miserable. Right?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you wrote this book. We have time for questions, and I believe the microphone will come to you if you raise your hand for Claire. Questions for Claire.
Hi. I have to look into your book. It sounds amazing. I'm also a tomboy, and I think ambition and going forward is amazing. I wanted to ask you, actually, obviously I'm not American. I cannot vote. I think Hillary's time is going to come this year. But I wanted to tell you that in Europe, a perspective on American politics has changed completely since Obama is the president, for better, obviously. So my question to you is, how would you sum up his presidency? How are you proud of him because you were supporting him? Do you think that he did his job?
I do. I think that I will, there you go. I can certainly be critical of the president. I have when we talk sometimes. He doesn't like to eat his spinach, which for him is schmoozing politically.
No, he doesn't.
Other politicians, which is part of the job of president. But I'll give you an example of what I'm proud of him about. He always asked me to call him if I thought he was in the bubble and was losing perspective. And I called him right before we passed the health care bill. And I said, I just want to make sure you know what you're doing. This could implode. This will be used as a political 2x4 against you and our party. And I want to make sure you know that because it may mean that you might not be reelected. And I just want you to make sure that you're not so in the bubble you don't know that. And he said to me, you know, I'd rather get the health care bill done than have a second term. Now, I like that. You know, he was willing to spend all of his political capital getting that done. And it's not perfect, but we just found out today 15 million more people have insurance now. It's not a bad day's work for a president. So I think the hardest thing for this president has been that everybody painted on him their hopes and aspirations. They made him what they wanted our country to be. And he said, I'm going to make it post-partisan. I'm going to make it so we're not doing this food fight between Democrats and Republicans. So what was the one thing Republicans could do to make him fail? Not work with him. All they had to do was walk away and say, we're not working with him, and therefore you did not accomplish what you told the American people you would. And that was really difficult for him. He tried. He put Republicans in his cabinet. He tried to work. But, you know, Mitch McConnell made very clear very early, my number one job is making sure that Barack Obama is not elected again. Not my number one job is to find common ground. So it's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
Senator, first of all, I'd like to say you look absolutely beautiful today.
Thank you.
And my question is about aesthetics. Pretty Ladylike, I'm hearing you talk so much about ambition and how important that is for young women. I can't wait to get into this book. Is there a consciousness or an awareness on your part about how your aesthetic either intersects or complements or supplements the way your ambition as a woman is perceived?
Oh, boy, that's a really good question, and it's really hard. I think the thing that is most, you know, I mean, Mika and I could do a whole 2 hours on weight.
Really, there's not enough
She's
time.
been very kind and hasn't said, you know, Claire, looks like you put a few back on. But it is something that I think all of us struggle with. I will say, though, I serve in the United States Senate with some amazing women. Some of them never wear makeup. Some of them wear makeup every day. Some of them dress in these amazing outfits. Some of them, you know, you can tell they're just kind of trying to be comfortable.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah, no.
It's the uniform.
Well, but some of the women in the Senate don't even wear the uniform. And I really, you know, I mean, look at Barbara McCaskill, right? I mean, she's the first to, like, say, you know, I'm short and I'm, you know. And this is not a woman that is going to be held out as the aesthetic of Barbara McCaskill. But what a powerhouse. What a role model she's been. How much do I admire her? How much do I want to be like her? So I do think what I have chosen in terms of my career gives women permission to kind of not worry so much about whether or not your eyebrows are plucked or whether your legs are shaved or whether you've got the latest outfit on, because so much of it is about substance, and that's a blessing.
Hi. I want to ask you a little bit about Ferguson in terms of how you rose to power as a woman and what obstacles you had to overcome. And how that plays out in terms of battling racial inequality in Missouri specifically. So if you could speak to that.
Listen, Ferguson is one of the hardest issues I have tackled as a public official. And the reason is there seems to be an inability in the narrative that has been set up, to some extent by the media, for folks to walk in the other person's shoes. And by that I mean the African American protesters have every reason to be speaking out about institutional racial bias in this country. And I do think what's happened to our country over the last year is finally stimulating. And Jeff Smith's here. He's writing an amazing book that will contribute to the conversation of criminal justice reform in this country. It is an imperative topic we've got to tackle. Having said that, this us versus them mentality that's been set up by Ferguson, that it's the police versus the protesters, it's terribly counterproductive. And I've listened, I won't say what media outlet, but I've been doing all these media hits, and this happened yesterday. I listened to the intro about Ferguson yesterday afternoon in my earpiece. And I'm listening to this intro, and it's like a state of emergency, you know, and you would think the place is burning down. Then I heard the anchor talking to the reporter in Ferguson, and you know what the reporter said before he went on? You know, nothing's happening here. It's so quiet. And I went, isn't that really part of the problem? I saw times in Ferguson when there were 5 cameras for every one protester. The narrative got away from the reality that there are good people coming together and doing reform. We got a long way to go, but we've made progress. But this notion that I've got to be on one side or the other, I flatly reject it. I know most of the police officers are of good heart and want to police their communities with respect. I know that most protesters are not hoodlums or thugs. The vast, vast majority of them are wonderful Americans that work hard and love God. And so the notion that we now have this narrative set up that it is us versus them, I'm going to work as hard as I can to keep pushing against that, because I don't think that's how we're going to solve any problems. It's just going to make it worse. And the media is part of that problem. Sorry, Mika.
We had the same problem in Baltimore with the coverage, with one building burning, and you would have thought Baltimore, the entire city was burning. No,
Right.
I totally hear you on that.
Sheryl Sandberg's book spoke to a lot of the issues that you've raised here today, and unfortunately I haven't read the book yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I wondered if you could speak to the controversy that book caused, in the view that so much of the criticism comes on women of what they should be doing to achieve their ambition, instead of the policy environment, the social environment that creates the constraints on them to rise up. And in your role as a politician, as a U.S. Senator, could you speak at all to what you think are the relevant policy changes that we could make that might make it easier for women to be successful and to achieve and realize their ambition?
Well, I think Mika and I have talked about this a lot. I think there's some truth on both sides of this equation. I think there are women who aren't leaning in, as Sheryl would say if she were here. And I know we both call her a good friend, and she's terrific. But there's also, institutionally, some assumptions that Mika encountered, that somehow her worth, they could minimize her worth without consequences. They assumed that wrongly. I do think we have to work on policies of more paid maternity leave and paternity leave. And there have to be more bosses that look down their nose at men who don't take paternity leave. Because part of this is this thing in the back of your head that if you take it and the men don't, then you're not going to get ahead at work, and somehow you're going to be left behind. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens at Netflix. Will women take a whole year of maternity leave? Will men? And what will that say about their values and priorities, and what will it mean to that company? I think it's a terrific experiment for us to observe at Netflix. And obviously, at a minimum, we need to be a developed country that has paid maternity and paternity leave like all of the other developed countries in the world, which we do not have now.
And equal pay.
And equal pay.
And I think it's a mixture. If I could just add a little tag on, it's a mixture of not only the part that can be controlled or changed through policy regulations, or just good leadership by successful CEOs and companies that find innovative ways to retain women and great female talent. But the part that we can control is just as important part of this equation, because you're right, if we don't take that year, if we don't feel like we're good enough to ask for this or that or express the need for something, then we are a part of, we have become a part of the problem to an extent, because if we don't actually act on what's available to us, then our other female counterparts won't, and it just continues. We have to actually have an environment where we feel confident enough and we know our value that we can actually function. I know that I rushed back after I had my second child to work. Rushed back to work, thought I would lose my job. Didn't get maternity leave pay. So I needed the money too. And so many bad things happened. So many, and I've been a little more confident. That clutter in my head. Probably would not have had a really bad accident with my baby, and I probably would have still had my job. So it's important to talk, I think, about both sides of the equation.
Yep.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
My question would be, as a senator today, if Donald Trump was elected, how do you think it would affect today's nation and
keep a straight face.
The progress we've had such far?
Well, I am just going to stay firmly rooted in the proposition that that's not going to happen. Once again, I hate to pile on, and she's my friend, so I know she won't take it personally, but Donald Trump right now is a uniquely American, extraordinary experience. It is about eyes and ears and clicks. More people are talking about Donald Trump around their offices today than almost anything else. Someone asked me how many people at home have talked to me about the Iran deal. I can honestly say maybe 1 or 2 or 3 as I've gone to the grocery store or when I'm out shopping. But Donald Trump, everybody wants to talk about Donald Trump. At the end of the day, people in this country will elect a president that represents strength and stability. We don't want somebody who is going to be bluff and bluster in the Oval Office. And even though Donald Trump has 20–25% of the Republican votes right now, that means he's got 80–75% of the Republicans who definitely know who he is, who are not voting for him. So I don't believe in the long run he's going to be able to sustain this. He hasn't really said anything yet. There's no substance. He likes the women.
He told me he's going to be
supports the women.
Great for women.
He's great for women. And, the Mexicans love him. He says the Mexicans love him. The Mexicans love him. And, that China's terrible, and he's a billionaire, and by the way, he's a billionaire, and he can make deals, and everybody else is stupid and dumb. And if you're a woman, you're a dog, or you're ugly, or whatever. I just don't think, even in the quest for eyes and ears and clicks, that's a sustainable model to be elected President of the United States. So relax, sleep well tonight. You will not be talking about President Trump in November of 2016. I promise. Just tell everybody Claire promised Donald Trump will not be president.
Okay. And I'm collecting clips for Morning Joe. She feels the burn and the Trump bite. Okay, move on.
It's going to be our last question.
Hi, so you're so inspiring. Like, I'm striving to be a future neurosurgeon, and so I have a lot of drive and motivation. But one of the things that I was curious about was that how do you manage to be ambitious but also have a family? And where do you draw the line?
Well, here's the thing. You've got to, women who are like you and like me and like Mika, we think we have to do everything perfectly. And what you'll discover as you have children, do you have children yet? Okay. When you have children, what you'll discover is that's something you're going to have to get used to not being. I mean, I say in the book, dust bunnies under the bed, to hell with it. Clothes not perfectly pressed, a stain on my son's shirt, there's this natural prioritization that occurs in your life. And because these children you love more than life itself, you prioritize them in ways that count. You figure out the way to be in their lives in a way that is very meaningful. You can do that and do a very stressful, important job at the same time. And it is just a matter of balancing. You can't do everything perfectly, but you can do it all. And that's why I want to say to those women who are saying, I can't be a good mother if I'm working, you can be a good mother if you're working. Now, if you choose not to, I'm down with that. I support you in that choice. Unfortunately, most American mothers don't have that choice. They have to work. So we've got to make sure they have safe and available and accessible daycare that they can afford. We've got to make sure that we support them with policies at work that support their motherhood. But mostly, the mothers have to realize that their kids are going to be fine. I have a Senate colleague of mine that will go nameless, and she was worrying one day about, I said, listen, my kids are great. I want you to spend some time with them. They turned out great, and I was not perfect. I screwed up a lot. So it'll be fine. Love them, make them a priority, it'll all work.
Clara McCaskill, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Mika.
Thank you so much.